If I'm in my terminal and I have virtual environment activated, and in that virtual environment, let's say I have Flask installed, if I type Flask run, Flask will automatically look for an environmental variable called Flask app to see if I have already designated a file in which it can use in order to start up a Flask server, and that it'll use the configuration that's found in that file. And there are some assumptions made that it will do otherwise. For example, it will run on a single thread workzug server, so you can preview your code on a local address. We'll have to change that for when we publish our app, because we want it connected to Nginx or a more powerful web server that can handle greater traffic. But we'll deal with that later. And we also don't use Flasky.py. That's from Mr. Grinberg, which is awesome stuff. But no, instead we are connected to Flaskinni.py, and there are a couple really important points and important things happening in that file. However, let's just look at these two. First, I'm importing something from app, but app isn't another Python file. Instead, what it is a folder, and because this folder has an init, a dunder file, double underline file called init, I can treat this in Python as a module. It's really handy. And if I refer to it just as its folder name, then Python will automatically attempt to use this file here. So this method is being imported from this init file, and then I'm calling that method and executing it, and I'm passing an environment. I'm trying to look up an environmental variable just like this to see if I have a different settings file that has been selected. Otherwise, just use settings. But actually, if you look at this code, there's a goof here, because I'm not using that variable parameter that's being passed right here. That should be right here instead of settings, because I would just ignore it if you put in a different configuration request. I would ignore it because I'm using settings anyway, so that needs to be fixed. Couple key vocab checks. This is our main file context, and so this is the source of our application, and that's important for later. We'll come back to that, but oftentimes when we build references and assemble a very complex tree of files, we need to know the origin point of our thinking, and this is it. And the next concept to reinforce is an application factory, and that's what this is. I boot up, I instantiate Flask, and then I bolt on a bunch of extensions, and then I return the object that was created. I build it this way because it helps me keep things organized, as we'll discuss more about, but it also allows me to run it using different configurations for various test scenarios that we'll also be looking at later on. But before I finish my application factory, we hit our next big concept, and that is a blueprint. I'm still studying about blueprints, so I'm not going to try to elegantly explain them because I will mess it up. So read about them as I'm doing them. They're really handy. I thought at first that they would be a perfect slice of the MVT pattern, meaning that if I have a main blueprint, then all of my views, like every single page, my profile, looking up friends, or whatever are built into every app that Flaskinni would have, your main files, all of the handy routes would all be there, as well as all of your models, the user blog posts, all of the database schematics would be here, and your templates would have a main file as well, and so you have your MVT all right here. But things actually get a little bit tricky if you have models inside individual modules like this. I found it inconvenient, and I liked to actually move my models to a different folder. I actually keep it in the app folder, directly have a models folder, and keep my M part of the MVT elsewhere. And now templates are over here, so views are in here, and so all of them are now picked apart. It's very unlike the Ruby on Rails architecture that I've also studied, where the whole MVC, they call it a little bit different over there, and is all contained in a single scaffolding, a little package. So to keep things simple, for right now, let's just consider this as I'm registering all of my views. And my views are my controller logic. This is the brain. This is how I load up web pages. So I pull in the templates that are likely labeled under the same folder as this, but they don't have to be. So it's not a strict adherence to MVT. I could share between one blueprint and my own custom blueprint that we'll build for your particular app. That needs not, they can share files, so it doesn't have to be main. Same thing with the models. If I put a separate models folder here instead of having a models file here in main, then multiple, like the user, many things can share that model. So anyway, here's where the main views controller logic is being added onto the app, and those views have links to pull stuff in from the templates, and those templates have references to pull things in, like images, from the static folder. And I'm not sure if this is absolutely the best practice, but here in the Flaskinni.py, our main context, I also load up all of the models here by name. And that's because on the first request, after I get the app from the application factory, I can have these decorators combining things onto events. So before your first request, it's going to commit everything to the database and make sure that the administrative users are set up. This is where the models are officially connected in my mind. Okay, that's got to have been good enough for you to work up some questions. So let me know what you got.